Olivier. I'm the chair of the School of Therapeutic Sciences Research and Postgraduate Studies Committee, and that's also the committee who's presenting this event today. So let's get going. It's 1 o'clock on a Monday afternoon. So the first thing that I would like to do is just to welcome everyone. I see we have a wide variety of attendees from our own school and from the wider faculty and university. I would like to welcome our head of school, Professor Helen Maeswa. Thank you for attending this and for the support of our research endeavors in the school. And just welcome to everyone who's here and who's happy and welcome and eager to learn something new. Also a special welcome to our presenters, Nina Lewin, Taariq Surtee, and Eleni Flack-Davison. Let me just give you a quick overview of how the afternoon will work. May I ask just that everyone just mute their mics if you are not talking or not asking a question. So we're going to kick off with some introductions of our speakers. I'm going to ask each of our speakers just to quickly switch on their mics and just give us a 2 or 3 sentences all about themselves so that you can just know who you're talking to and who the person behind what we are doing here today is. And then we are going to let Nina Lewin start her presentation, and then afterwards Taariq Surtee and Eleni Flack-Davison will then facilitate the question and answer session. If you have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat box. You're happy, you can do that. We are not going to answer questions in between while we do the presentations. We will answer the questions at the Q&A session at the end. And this is especially done because we only have 1 hour to do this. Okay, let me hand over to our guests. Nina Lewin, would you like to maybe just switch on your camera and quickly tell us where you're from and who you are?
Hi, so I'm from the library and I'm kind of at the end of the chain. So my job involves the curation of data, preservation of data. I have the honor to be the person who registers DOIs. So if you need a DOI urgently, I'm the person you call.
Good to have you with us, Nina. And Taariq.
Taariq's really sick today. He's got a terrible voice, so he might not be coming on just yet.
Okay, perfect.
We're saving his voice. But
yeah.
I'll tell you, me and Taariq work very closely together. And basically, he does the ICT and the storage part of component of it, and we teach together a lot because he's eResearch. And so he's the person you want to talk to before you make a data management plan and promise that the university has given you bunches of resources, which it may not be giving you. He's the person who's holding on to the storage, who's trying to get the software in, and who's managing data centers. And we also apply for funding.
Super. That's a good overview. Yes, let's save his voice. I know he also had a bit of a challenge last week, so that's perfectly fine. We'll see him a bit later in this hour. And Eleni Flack-Davison, would you like to just introduce yourself?
Hello.
We can hear you. We can't see you.
Okay. Sorry. Okay. Good afternoon. Thanks very much. Yeah, my name is Eleni Flack-Davison. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm the legal advisor to the DVC Research and Innovation. I oversee all the ethics committees as I'm the research compliance manager, and part of that, of course, is POPIA compliance. So with POPIA coming into effect last year on the 1st of July 2021, part of that is to make sure that we have processes and something in place and a structure in place for the data management plan that our researchers need to have in place. And of course, Nina and Taariq will take us down that path and hopefully make it as simple and as practical as possible. Thanks.
Thanks, Eleni. No, you can see everyone, we have a winning team here together. Let's get going. Nina, I'm going to hand over to you to do your presentation. And once you're done, I'll ask Taariq to take over. Over to you, Nina.
And I'm going to ask Eleni to jump in, because what you may not realize is that Eleni is one of the authors of the Code of Conduct. And so I feel quite scared to be speaking in front of her. So Eleni, please do jump in if I'm saying anything wrong. Okay. I first want to begin this talk with an acknowledgement that this isn't easy. And it's not easy because of POPIA. POPIA itself wouldn't be that difficult to comply with. What makes POPIA difficult is that POPIA isn't the only thing that you have to comply with. And that's why we have research data management plans. On the one hand, you have now been given enhanced obligations to protect and preserve your data. On the other hand, you've been asked to share your data by a large number of people who have the right to ask that. So we're going to skip past the dilemma quite quickly to the solution. And the solution is you and a data management plan. Why do we say this? Well, and Prof. Olivia convened this because she was one of the early adopters. She was one of the first people that had to deal with this dilemma, and that came out of this dilemma with a really excellent data management plan. So if you want to ask for an example, she has one, and a legal one. Eleni wrote the agreements. And what we have seen that a number of researchers have come to within the university, and also, in fact, when we scan the landscape internationally, is that this is a balancing act that every researcher is going through. And it's not a new balancing act. You already do this. Every time you do an ethics application, you think about data sharing, or at least we hope you would have, but you certainly think about the dissemination of your research results. You think about your science. And you think about safeguarding your participants. Now, it just means that you have to do it a little bit more formally than perhaps you did it before. And one way to do it a little bit more formally is to create a data management plan. So I'm going to give some hand descriptions over here now. So on the one hand, this huge pressure up here, protect your data, protect your data, protect your data. And people are sort of hearing a message that goes, don't ever let this precious data out of your hands, right? And then on the other hand, we have people going, share your data, share your data, share your data, share your data, give it away, give it away, give it away, give it away. These are contradictory positions. Let's be quite clear about this. This is not easy to manage. So the solution that people have found is themselves. How do you manage both of these things? You manage them by seeing your data differently and by seeing your research differently. What we're saying over here is, instead of looking at each research proposal, and each research proposal has an ethics application, and each research proposal has a funding application, and each research proposal now has a data management plan, and that's more admin, right? Well, no. What we are saying is a lot of people have sort of coalescing on a similar solution, and that is take a step back, have a research data management strategy, look at your data over the long term, and start to design your data collection almost separate from the specific research proposal that you're going for. Start to think about your data collection as a very long-term project that will go through your research, that may be there for 10, 20, 30 years. a lot of people kind of go, well, that means we're going longitudinally, right? Well, okay, yes, you can string data together a long time and that will work. But you can also string data together cross-sectionally, and you can also string data together in puzzles. It doesn't mean that when we're saying this, everybody must collect a full-term data set. We're saying, consider your data collection. Think about your data collection strategically, and think about keeping and building a data collection together in a way that starts to make sense, in a way that starts to become usable. And then the one hand and the other hand start to come together, and you have something. That ends the hand description component of this. So that's why we say it comes down to you. And yes, you are the person who already has a huge concern for your respondents. So this is the next very important point, and I'm jumping straight to it. Funders have wanted this for a long time, but they weren't willing to pay for it. They are now willing to pay for it. They do allow this on a budget. And at this point, if you want to pop things in the chat, and we can take a look at it, see if we need to answer it. But I want to really emphasize data managers. If you have a large-scale project, if you have a PhD student, this is a real job, data management. It is a lot of work, make no mistake about it. And it's worthwhile getting that person to take that burden off you. And this is one of the benefits of research data management. Research data management has been an unfunded mandate in research for a very long time. This is something that you do on the side. Oh, you write these things, you keep track of these things. It's sort of part of your methodology. No, it's actually quite a lot of the day-to-day work that you do. So that's the upside. Now, how has the Code of Conduct changed things? And Eleni, this would be the time for you to jump in. But I would say it's made things a lot more formal than they used to be. Anonymity, privacy, confidentiality. Those kind of meant I won't give anyone your name. They don't mean that anymore. In fact, within the Code of Conduct, we don't talk about anonymity. We talk about pseudo-anonymity because it's very, very difficult to promise someone absolute anonymity. Data can be re-identified. You can't use the solution of taking somebody's name and address out of it and just, sharing it. What the Code of Conduct means is that you have to work quite a lot harder at what it would mean to protect somebody. Eleni, is there something you would like to jump in on this?
Yeah, thanks. Just this data, if it is de-identified and all the identifiers are taken away, it's that kind of thing that the Code of Conduct will overlook and see in terms of the POPIA Act as well.
Yes, so it's not impossible, but you just have to kind of work quite a bit more harder at really saying what de-identification is and how you're going to pull it off. In terms of confidentiality, you can't just lock it in a desk drawer, whatever used to be said. You need to have some level of access controls and generally in some kind of. And I think the mind shift, I put down you don't own the data. Well, I don't think you ever really did, but I think the mind shift is that a researcher has their data and that kind of was theirs and they can do what they like with it. Within the Code of Conduct, the data is far more the data subjects. You need a lawful basis to do almost everything. Yes, you're a data custodian, but you're not the complete and final decision maker. There are lots of people with lots of rights in that data. A lot of things depend on the consent. Data subjects always could withdraw their consent, always, and you would remove the data. But now they have far more fine-grained rights. They can say it's inaccurate, various things like that. So there's that. Okay, so let's get down to business. How are you actually going to then do this? Okay, so let's go back to these 3 blocks. First, we need to protect. So that happens under the various policies within VIT and primarily the data, the ethics application. This privacy by design is a well-known philosophy. So I sit on the preservation side, but I'm involved in the beginning side because it's how you design your data to be collected and preserved that matters. Don't promise anonymity if you can't keep it. Do promise it if you can, is what that meant. And that's when you're writing that, that's how you're going to protect the data. But on the other hand, how are you going to open the data? And there are funder requirements. They are local in terms of the NRF. They are international in terms of various NIH things. And they are becoming more and more I won't say fixed, but I will say we're getting closer and closer to mandatory. Every field will always have its variations, but don't overlook the fact that this is no longer just something you can avoid. So FAIR is the oldest standard. It's findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And that's become the standard for the depositing of most data. Findable means, in general, it's got some kind of link. We do DOIs. And so does most of the world. Accessible means somebody can access it. What that does, I've said this before, I'm going to say this again. No, write to me and we'll give you the data is not really going to cut it. Interoperable means, as I said, to begin with, think about your data and how does your data fit into other pieces of data. And who's pushing this? The funder requirements and journals asking for data access. So we tried to bring all of this together in the VIT's research data management policy, which is a new policy we put out at the end of last year. And in practical terms, how do you make things interoperable and findable? You add metadata. There's different forms of metadata. Those are the ones we have up there. How do you make them reusable and accessible? You have software for access controls. How do you make it accessible? You have legal agreements. I will still say very often the best person to reuse your data is you. But it may not only be you, and it shouldn't only be you. It should also be your collaborators, your students, or other people entirely. You can't sit on data, is what this whole thing boils down to. CARES is something out of Botswana. You'll notice it's a far less technocratic approach. And again, it's something that ethics committees always did, but it's asking you to consider when you share the data, who benefits. It can't just you want your respondents to benefit, and you have to think about when you share your data, how your respondents benefit. Authority to control talks to the fact that there are a number of different people who have rights in data. None of them should be forgotten. Responsibility is come back to your responsibility to your participants and ethics, of course. But I think to summarize CARES, it's about saying, well, the communities from whom the data is taken kind of need to talk about what they want done with that data and how they want it shared and how it's cited and so on. Okay, so I have, and Eleni can come in on, I have my own sort of classification that I've put down to remember. And here's the important part about those protected, especially protected. we're talking over there this about really any kind of interesting research you can do. This hits kind of to the core of almost any kind of research is going to need some part of that really to be interesting. So beliefs could be political, religious, of any kind, behaviors, memberships. It's to be honest, quite difficult to think about a research that would involve none of the protected categories of personal information. Because you see, if it's interesting, we want to know about it. We need to know about it because it affects our research, and then it's also in the Act. So this is my personal history of how things got here. And again, Eleni is welcome to interrupt me and tell me that I'm wrong, but that's how I see it. I just really need to make it clear. We are moving data around the world the entire time. This act is not a bad thing. It was an essential thing. While complying with this act is painful, not having enacted all would have been worse. We would have had no capacity to do all sorts of things. Complying with this act actually is what enables transcription on teams to work. It's what enables transcription in general to work. So Taariq's going to take over at the data lifecycle, but what we're saying when we talk about consents is that we have to, oftentimes consents had strange gaps in them, to be honest. We didn't tell people what was happening with the data all through the stages, where it was being collected, where it was being stored, how it was being analyzed. And that was because sometimes researchers didn't know. And it's still okay to say, I don't exactly know, but here are the ranges of options of what I can do. This is my own personal history of how we got to the imperative for open data. And when I say scandals, I mean really a fairly large collective body of particular fields starting to realize they had a problem. That what they had been doing up to that point wasn't working. We were getting significant problems in our science. I'm not saying everyone was cheating, or even many people were cheating. But what it became clear is that when you have 1 million papers going out, it was partly the ramping up of science. When you have these many papers, when you have these many journals, when you have bridged peer review, when you don't pay for peer reviewers, in my opinion, when you have the system that used to sort of be held together with a lot of trust, and you can't read all the papers that are going out, we started to have problems, and we need the data. And Taariq, would you like to come in over here? Because this is the practical sort of data life cycle. This is how the data management plan works.
Sure, thanks. Just mute you there. Thank you, everyone. Just bear with me, I'm a bit short of breath, recovering from something. No, not COVID. I've had 2 tests already and both are negative. So anyways, okay, on the top of this slide, very simply, is our data, our research life cycle. We prepare a research project. We then go through and start doing the research, collecting the data, analyzing the data. And when we're done with our research, we publish our findings and we do something with the data. And that's really at a high level what the research life cycle is. And then the data life cycle obviously mimics that. So what we do to assist everybody with this research and the data management plan is, in the first stages, when we're preparing our project, when we're submitting it for funding, etc., is we help you draw up a data management plan. And I'm going to conclude my part of the talking with the example. That we worked with Prof. Rosniak now recently. Part of the process is to assign a data steward. It could be a separate person, or it could be the principal investigator themselves, depending on the size of the project and the budgeting and the size of the data, etc., that we're working with. Okay, so now on the bigger picture with regards to managing and looking after our data, what does that mean? And I'm referring now to the second row here. Research begins and the data is collected. So we talk here about data sharing as a project input, and with what Eleni and Nina has just been talking about, we know that we need to be a bit careful about anonymity and etc. with the data, and we put measures through the data management plan to tell our funders how we are going to look after the data and share it amongst all the researchers and all the parties that's involved in the research project. Oops, something happened. Nina, something happened? I'll carry on talking though. And then at the same time, the data management plan would tell us about assigning types of metadata to the plan. Nina, we can go back. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the metadata that will be generated for the plan falls into two parts. The DOI, which is your digital identifier, which becomes a permanent and initial digital identifier all over the internet for the data, and then storing the data centrally and making it accessible when we're finished with the project, if we choose to store it and share it with other academics and other researchers out there in the world. And we offer that service of storing it on WITS's storage servers. With regards to the last part, the results being published, etc., through a committee which sits as part of the ethics committees is the data access committee. Doesn't necessarily have to be lots of people, but somebody who understands data, understands the value of data and storing and keeping data for archiving and preservation, all library perspective, etc., will sit there and help us make these decisions to store this data for the university and then make it accessible through library resources. Nina, now we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so I don't make this very laborious because we're going to spend a little bit of time on the actual data management plan when I'll explain my way through it a little bit. So the main roles with regards to a data management plan are roles that already exist when you apply for funding. So it's obviously the principal investigator themselves who's the accountable owner of the entire project, a data steward who would manage the data, put it into the right formats to be stored, all that with the help of us, Nina and I, in library and eResearch. And then the data access committee, who will have to have a look at things when the ethics committees look at this as well, and guide us into longevity of the data. Just with regarding to the data collection and data storage, just some of the tools that have been sanctioned by the university because they do comply with our security requirements for POPIA, etc., is first one, RedCap, which is a survey type tool like SurveyMonkey, a lot better, but I think you guys know about RedCap. We can support it. It's supported by a health consortium, and we've got additional resources as well that we can help you with. We can do a bit of training in that on it as well. iRods is again a research-built storage tool built by the Americans with their Department of Nuclear Science, if I'm not mistaken, in several universities. Very secure, very strong. We have our own instance, and we intend making that our main archival resource for storing data. While you're working with the data, there are other alternatives. I think I've forgotten to put it in the slide. You can use WITS's Google Drive access or WITS's OneDrive access. Those are secure within the university environment, and you can use that to store your current data. There's quite large storage on that, up to 1 terabyte on each one, so it's quite significant. If you need bigger than that, come and talk to us. Atlas TI, for those who don't know, is a qualitative analysis tool. We bought those centrally, so we have licenses for you. And then in terms of statistical or quantitative tools, we have quite a few. So again, you can just have a chat with me and we can find the right one for you. These are all available through the university. Just moving on then to the data management. So how we arrive at what metadata is important is we've got several industry standards, the DDI, DDC, etc. Nina knows them better than me, but we comply with those. And if those metadata models don't fit your data, then again, we can work something out between us. And we'll probably come up with maybe a new schema that we can offer to the world as another output from our research. Going on then to the repositories, right? So the DOI is a digital object identifier. It is now a referenceable item. So if we put it up there and it's your data, somebody uses it, they can reference it in their research as well. So that's good for us. It brings more recognition to the university and is under our name. What's been happening up until this point is that just give me a second. The funders will register the DOI under their name, but now we want to do it. So we'll help you doing that, and we'll generate the code in that to do it. Obviously, we meet all journal standards, etc. And yeah, it's there for life. White space, I think Nina would have mentioned already, is the library resource where people can find out about all of our data. So when we store our data on iRods and create DOIs, etc., white space will be a space where we can start looking for these things. Just in terms of practical reasons, we do have a research data management policy, which outlines how we look after data, responsibilities of the different parties like yourselves, the university and the funders, etc. And because data is not free, storage is not free, we've allowed for storing up to, I'll come to your question now. We allow for storage of up to 5 years, okay? And if the data access committee, and you would influence and talk to the data access committee, etc., if we find there's value in archiving it and preserving it forever, then we'll do that as well. I just want to see some of the questions that's come up. What's an example of data management software? Nina, do you know of any data management software? I know that there's the data management game, which is a nice one to help us figure out how we want to manage these things. But Nina? You muted, Nina?
So that's a training game. Because librarians were acutely aware that data management was kind of a boring subject, we spent quite a lot of time making games from the data management training. We have a game, a choose your own adventure game. Data management software is an enormous topic. The answer to that question is for which subject, for what kind of data you need, what kind of access control do you need. But the short answer is REDCap, REDCap, REDCap. We are using REDCap, we are stretching REDCap round corners. We are using REDCap for absolutely anything that you can basically put in a form, because it does have significant data management capacities within it. It's got access control, it's got identifier control, it's secure, and it's got audit trails. So yeah, that's our short answer, but there's a ton out there. There is linguistic software, there is qualitative software, there's a whole ton of different kinds of clinical management software that does different sorts of things. There's software directly for interacting with respondents. Yes, so Atlas TI and so on can be done for anybody who can get the license. We've got it site-wide. The answer to who can we contact to set up a data management plan? Us, that's why we're here. Yes, we do have a research data management policy. No, it's not on the LibGuides yet. Actually, it is on mine, but we will be distributing it more broadly. And I wonder, Eleni, do you want to start taking over questions, or should we share our sample data management plan at this point in time? Where do you want to go, Prof?
Nina, I think we'll do questions near the end. Yeah, so you and Taariq can finish your presentation. Thanks.
All right. Okay, let me go on then. Thank you, Nina. You gave me a chance to breathe a bit. I'm just reading this one about Power BI. So WITS does have Power BI as well. We don't have a universal license as far as I know. I just know there's a unit, support unit called Business Intelligence, and they promote it a lot. So for research purposes, I've seen some demos on it, but I've not used it myself, so I don't know much about it. If you really want to know about it, give me a call and I'll get you in touch with Business Intelligence, and then we can see if it would work for you.
I just want to say something over here. This is a teaching plan that we took from Prof. Lee Resnick. This is not her plan. Let us be very clear here. We changed this for teaching purposes.
Yeah.
The mistakes are ours. We butchered her beautiful data to make it easier to use as a display.
Yeah, coming to that one. Yeah, okay. With regards to Access, Atlas TI, Starter, etc., just email me or give me a call. I'll point you in the right direction. Some of the licenses I manage directly, others I just put you in contact with who has them. But holistically, we're trying to get all licenses where practical managed together at some stage so that it's an easy way to deal with it. And also, I just want to make a point here, now that we're speaking about this, you don't have to use what we've got. We prefer that you do, but if you have to use something else because your funder says so, or because your collaborators elsewhere are doing something else, provided it's safe. The main thing is just keeping the data safe while we use it. So yeah, you can do that, but maybe just have a chat with us if there's something obscure that somebody else wants to use. Yeah, okay.
I think that the central component is obviously we have to check that it's legal. We have to see where the data is going and where it's coming from, where it's being deposited and where it's being held. We need to see what the rights are in that software and how it's being produced. And then we need to know that we can manage it on our system. But the last thing we want to do is restrict you in terms of the thing your own database and what you think is going on.
Okay, so if I can now just spend maybe a few minutes on the data management plan. This is only an example. Prof. Resnick Lee developed it with us and used it in her funding, etc. We then took it and chopped a lot of what she's done off, so it may not make a lot of sense completely, but I think the essence of what we're trying to achieve with it is in here. And I've got two versions of this one, which is an example, and one without all of the example text in it, so it becomes a short little 3-pager. And then within some of the stuff, I mean, obviously you just talk to me about what's best, and then I help you write it and put it in. But just to give you an example, the whole first section is really something that you can take out of your bigger proposal that you're writing, where you explain your entire project to somebody. In this case, we reproduced it in the data management plan because we thought that we were concerned that the section, the DMP section, will go off to a different reader who may not necessarily read the entire proposal, and then they may lose context. So we just reproduced it and put it in there. So really, the whole section is just an example of what Lee's project is about. You can skip a couple of pages there.
So one of the things you'll notice that we changed in this section is that we put in a lot of scales. We put a sort of standardized things, and that was an example of what you would do if you were planning on keeping this data over the long term. So you'd want to have standardized scales so that things could be reproducible or things could be administered later on. You'd want to have some standard demographics, some standard definitions, and that's why we put this in that example.
And yeah, so there we look towards what current metadata schemas out there have to use to build on our example and make it robust. Yeah, and we'll obviously do the same thing in all cases. And if it doesn't fit, then we adjust it. But scales, metadata, all of that, just to keep things consistent, is very helpful. And funders need to see this so that they know they're got different data sets coming from different places in the world, but it's all the same at the end of the day. Yeah, I think that was the main thing. And then Nina, if you just skip one page forward. 1.3, yeah. So okay, it's obviously looking a bit wobbly on the way it's being presented on screen. Not sure why, but anyway. So like a lot of the stuff we put in the standard WITS tools, like we're saying we use REDCap because the research community knows now REDCap is a solid survey tool, and it already brings credibility to how we're managing the data. Same thing with the likes of iRods, and if you're using Stata or whatever other software, you know, we add it in there, and the more of these things that they see is, oh, okay, so the whole world uses this. It's robust. Let's use it. It brings credibility to our data management planning. We also put in there a section of how much data and space we're going to use. Okay. This section you can also include other things like your customized laptops or tablets or whatever it is you need to collect your data. Again, we talk about how those things would be secured behind the university's network so that the data is secure. And then we talk about how much size, etc., how much it's going to grow. It's obviously very helpful. Yep, there we go. Data collection, etc. This is you guys' bread and butter. I mean, I can't really teach you how to do this. I'm sure you know how to do all of these things, but we can help write it in a more IT kind of way, so that it appeals to the readers at the other end. Again, we've reproduced a section on roles and responsibilities. You can see what we also included in here, interestingly, was something about what outputs we are expecting from the research. So this is just an example. We're not saying that this is what was going to happen. 3 collaborative papers plus 1 sole authorship paper. So why we're doing this is already.
Can I just let Taariq catch his breath? As one researcher put it to me, you know, people, especially research collaborators, start off as friends, but they don't always end up that way. And the data underlies the paper. So those who control the data will control the paper. So it's important to have a collaboration agreement. That's where Eleni comes in. We want you to have far more agreements than perhaps you did before. We want you to think this through. If somebody is collaborating on a data paper, that means they have rights to certain parts of that data and rights to publish. And then what happens afterwards? And we want you to think that through. We want you to have a collaboration agreement, and we want that to be in writing. And sometimes that can be awkward. It's basically a bit like talking about money in a marriage. But we are saying kind of do a prenup, if that analogy makes sense.
Oh, I think we lost Nina altogether. I think. No, she's there. Okay. Yeah. Okay, we've skipped out a couple of pages, but the main thing about the data management plan I want to say is this template that we put together is taken from a bunch of good ideas other people have had, what the NRF has asked us to give them, and those kinds of things. It's not cast in stone, and we can come up and change it and customize it the way we need. I've also seen 1 or 2 funders have put in their own templates. So all we do is copy and paste into theirs rather than supply our own one. So it is very flexible. This whole field is fairly flexible and fluid in how it needs to go together. And in fact, there's already talk about standardizing something called the outputs management plan, which is a bigger version of this, which includes the things like we said, we're going to produce so many research papers out of it. The data itself will be an output, methodologies will be an output. You put all of that out there in an output management plan. So this is going to grow. I've also found with working with some academics is we have to go through this in detail together once or twice, and then after that it becomes quite easy to work on your own. And but we're always obviously there to help and support you. We had one very interesting case where we are offering a change to the metadata standard, which is nice. We'll wait for all of that to get published, etc., and then we'll know whether we were successful or not. But we've put that out there. I'm just trying to think what else. Maybe Nina, you can go down a little bit further. There's some more standard stuff in there. Yeah, see, this is a very nice schema that Lee has put together This is just an example of one. You see table relating to participant details. So this is very nice to show them how we're going to look after. Yeah, we're going to provide you these examples as well, Tanya. Definitely. And then you talk to her. So Lee's really detailed these things quite nicely in her one. And I've left some of it in there just to give you an idea of how the thinking goes into organizing data. And maybe if Lee has some time, if anybody wants to have a chat with her, talk to her. She's very good at this. She's come a long way in developing this thing.
And of course, I think Prof, the person who's assembled this thing, Prof Olivier was probably one of the pioneers in this particular one as well. She's really did an enormous amount of work on this.
Yeah, and brought us all here together today. It's so brilliant, and thanks. Let's go on, Nina. Next page. Yeah, more of the same. Putting it all together. Have a read through this entire example. Prof. Lee's put it together in a very, very nice way. Here's some standard stuff that we're putting in there. Data preservation strategy and standards. This is where Nina comes in. So we talk about how we're going to look after the data, how we're going to create handles and DOIs, etc. These things, again, just bring in the robustness and the credibility of the research we're doing to say that it's, being stored in the best place, being made available through the best standards. That we've added all of that in there. Section 4 also is just a lot of standard stuff about security, etc., and acknowledging the risks that we've got. We obviously comply with everything in the university. So through the research data management policy, we're talking about the acceptable use policy of the university, the data classification policy, the research integrity policy, all of those kinds of things, all kind of clumped all together. And we know most of this, we just kind of put it into one place so that it's a easy to reach document. So when funders ask for it, we've got all these things in place just to sort of, send it the proverbial telephone directory. We can just send it off to them and they can have a look at all of our policies if they want. Then this last section is just about the use of the research data. We are now, and through Eleni, making sure that we look at secondary use of data. So it's included in all of our thinking and agreements and discussion, etc. And then there's obviously the governance of the access. Mostly will lie with the accountable person, the PI, to grant access. We put in little processes and procedures. We've outlined it in these documents to say, if you want access, you submit a little proposal to say, I want access for these reasons. We know where it fits within our primary, secondary use of data, and so we lay it all out upfront, and funders know these types of things. We obviously retain.
So just to come in on this, what's really important is that there is governance. It can't just be on a whim. Yeah. Researchers have always shared their data, absolutely. What's the difference is the concept that right now we're talking about governance. That Prof may like you or not like you, but that's not going to determine whether you're going to get the data or not. Because funders need to know that this data is being managed in a way that goes beyond an individual.
Yeah, thanks for that, Nina. So yeah, obviously we do acknowledge and maintain embargo for as long as is necessary on all of the data before it gets out there. So all of that's put in there, and then the funders know upfront about these kinds of things. You can go next, please. You can go next, please, Nina. Next page. I know this example is very long. It comes up to quite a few pages. But the template itself is only 3 pages, and most of it, I promise you, is you'll probably copy and paste from other sources. So responsibilities, we've outlined it, and you'll probably leave the section mostly intact, where the DAC is mentioned because it's in the policy. The library, obviously, with the discovery of the data and the metadata management, eResearch, my office to provide you with the tools to be able to do all of these things and to guide you in terms of good practice, etc. So that's in there. And then section 7, the last section is really just contact information. Sorry, that's where all our policies in that are listed. And section 8 is contact information for yourselves. So you can see, I did put the link for the research data management policies on the internet. I think I gave you the wrong version or something, Nina. I may have not copied it here. Apologies, but I'll make sure it's up to date before I send this out to everybody. And there's the links to the relevant policies, etc. I see a question at the bottom there. Does one need a legal agreement to share data, or can the PI make the decision? Eleni, you want to help us with this one, please?
Thanks very much, Taariq. Yeah, it is recommended that an agreement is in place. It's a data transfer agreement, or if you are collaborating with a third party in that, then a collaboration agreement would be put in place and the data management would be included in that agreement. At the end of the day, it's not to be rigid or anything like that. It's a thing to actually protect you and the data that's being produced or shared as well. Because it is a form of intellectual property. So, you know, you give it to them and what can they do with it? So we have to outline exactly what they can do with it, what we can do with it, you know, that kind of thing. So, yeah, but in certain circumstances, the POPIA Act doesn't apply, and it doesn't apply to data that it's clean data, if I can call it that. It doesn't have any links to anyone. It can't be linked back to anyone or re-engineered or anything like that as well.
Okay, so yeah, so that's my story for now. We've got contact details. I see a hand up. I don't know who though. It's just a.
Let's just go. Hi,
Michelle.
Let's start the question and answer section. Right here, we've got 9 minutes. Eleni will facilitate it. So over to you, Eleni. You can take the floor and take the questions that's coming up. Hi, Prof. Ramsey. Very good to have you with us.
Thank you very much, Eleni. Do you mind if I ask another question?
No, go for it. Just to let everyone know as well, Michelle actually is the chair of the steering committee of the drafting of the Code of Conduct for ASSAF. So Michelle is...
I don't know what she could say that she wouldn't have the answer to, but
yeah. So please, Michelle.
So my question is more a legal one. Because, you know, if you're sharing, for example, process data, so this is it's not a POPI question, it's actually a question about data sharing and responsibility and accountability. So if I have a data set that I've processed, there's no personal information, it's all aggregate data, and I want to share this with a colleague overseas, do I need a legal document signed by the university, or can I have a memorandum of understanding outlining what the partners may or may not do and what I will and will not do?
Thanks, Michelle. That's a good question, and I think that's something that everyone is involved. If it is aggregate data and that, I always say an agreement is best to be in place so that you know what is happening, who can do what. I mean, a marriage is great, but when the divorce comes, it becomes messy. And you always go back to your intellectual contract or that kind of thing. So I would recommend for something to be in place. And yes, you are an employee of the university and the data was created in the course and scope of your employment with the university. So it would have to come to the university for an agreement to be signed between the VIT and the external party. But it just depends on what the intentions are with that. With that data, are you depositing into a repository, you know, that kind of thing as well. And the other question is, do you expect there to be further studies? Do you expect intellectual property to be created at the end of the day? And if so, do you believe that it would be commercializable and innovation at the end of the day?
Thanks, Eleni. I think I still have a few questions because you're quite right that all of those things make a difference. And there's also international good practice and making sure that we align to allow that open science. So I'm looking forward to extending the conversation. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks very much, Michelle. Looking forward to that as well. Open access is a big thing that is being pushed by publishers as well. So it is something that we need to delve into to make sure that we don't hinder the research, but actually enable it as best as possible. Thanks. I'm just going to go start from the top of the questions. Some have been answered. But it was mentioned that the data management policy, Taariq will be providing the links to the different policies that impact on the data management plan. There was another question, how can we contact to set up a data management plan for your project? Yes, so Taariq and Nina are the best to be contacted for that. How do we get access to softwares? You mentioned, okay, Taariq managed that. BI, that was also addressed. The interesting question Fiona raised is, should we integrate this template into our protocol submitted to ethics? Great question. Basically, what we are doing currently is you've got the application form for the non-medical, medical, and the AREC committees, and part of that application, it'll be like a second part to that application where the data management plan will be part of that application. So it's not that you have to submit a second document or anything. It will be part of the ethics committee's review application as well. And the ethics committees will be reviewing that data management plan as well, as is currently being done. But if you need inputs in that, Nina and Taariq will assist with that as well. Okay, Michelle's question was answered. How does one know what secondary data is available for which discipline for research use? Okay, sure, it's a good question. Generally speaking, with secondary data, it depends. It's a case by case and what is available. So it's a very open question in that. And with secondary data, we would have to also, in terms of POPIA, get consent to be able to use that data as well. Nina says we have set up repositories with the secondary data. We also have a process to search for data and to request data as well. Harriet Etheridge says medical already asks for the data management plan. It does, and it has been for a long time. But we're just formalizing process to be part of the application process of the ethics, so that it's all in one place. It's so that our researchers and applicants don't have to be uploading things separately and that. So it's all in one process. It's one and not a dual process, basically. Thanks for raising that. Victor Deandrade is, and data transfer agreements are required as well. Yes. According to POPIA, we will, in order to transfer data, especially to an international collaborator that's out of our borders, and that there are special circumstances where data transfer agreements are required, especially for vulnerable groups such as children's data that is being transferred. And in certain cases, it goes even to the extent of getting the information regulators' approval for that data to be transferred internationally as well. And I mean, children are vulnerable groups, but also there are other vulnerable groups. I mean, I don't have to preach to the choir here, that need that protection at the end of the day. You know, at the end of the day, the POPIA Act is, it's legislation. We have to be compliant one way or another. And the ASSAF Draft Code of Conduct is just codifying it, making it more practical for our researchers and applicants for the ethics to be able to know what they are doing on the ground is the correct thing moving forward. And we from the university side, from the research compliance management, as well as Nina from the library side and Taariq from the eResearch side, we are trying to make it as practical, as simple as possible for our researchers as well. But of course, there are maybe things that we might miss along the way, and that is where we need our researchers to approach us and to let us know that what we are doing is correct or not, or we can make things better. And I ask, and I open the floor up for questions, for issues with POPIA, with the data management plan. Are there issues? We need you to use us so that we can improve it. With the ethics side of things as well, if there are issues, please let us know. So that we can make that process easier for you to be able to use it at the end of the day. I see Harriet also mentions, it's a follow-up from Michelle's question, if the PIs cannot contract on their own behalf with collaborators to send de-identified or aggregate data overseas, does VIT have the resources to now evaluate all the agreements that will be coming their way if PIs can't enter into those agreements? Harriet, it is a good question, and we will have to standardize the agreements in order for the PIs to be able to enter into those agreements. But currently, as things stand, it's the university that will have to enter into those agreements. Yeah, and open to options of how we can make that process a lot easier as well. Yeah, I'll hand back over to Benita to end the session, and thank you very much.
Okay, super. Eleni, we are at 2 o'clock. Maybe if I can ask you, can we maybe answer the very last question, and then I'll close off. We are recording this session, so those of you who need to leave for other sessions or other meetings, please feel free to do so. I'll make the recording available within the next few days. Eleni, maybe just that last question, and then I'll close off with just a few practical remarks, and then we can close the session.
Great. Thanks, Benita. The question is, if you require identifying data such as date of birth or address to answer the objectives for your proposed study, how could you manage that with POPIA? Basically, you would need to get consent from your participants that you can use that information because it's personal information, and especially if they are providing date of birth, address, and that they are providing it to you. So as long as you stay within the realms of POPI, of receiving the informed consent, you're good to go. But also, if you de-identified the information to such an extent that it can't be linked back to a certain individual, that is the crux of the matter, that no one can link it back to a specific individual, then it should be fine. Thanks.
Super. Thank you very much, Eleni. I think from my side, if we can just maybe answer one more practical question. I'm very glad that Harriet is also with us. For us as researchers on the ground, what is our next step? We now, let's say we have an ethics application coming up for a study that we are doing. What can we do practically to make sure that we comply 100%? From reading this policy to using the template, if you can maybe break things down a bit more practically for us, and then we'll close the session.
Great, thanks, Benita. So the processes currently remain as they are. You apply for ethics, but you do consider where do you keep your data, how do you destroy it, all those questions. And hopefully within the next couple of months, we can add the data management plan to the actual application process. So it's there, you can just add it. If you do need assistance with the data management plan, please contact Nina and Taariq. They are your first port of call at the end of the day with the data management plan. And in terms of data transfer agreements, material transfer agreements, collaborations, and so on, please contact me. And even if you have other questions, please contact me as well, and I'll put you either in the in contact with the right people, and we are open to assisting our researchers at the end of the day. Nina says we also recommend access control. You can collect information, but hold the data carefully. You might not share it and only share a part of it later.
Super.
Great.
Okay. Yes, thank you very much. And I want to really lower anxiety on behalf of myself and all our fellow researchers. This is really a process. We are learning every day with every step of the way and every new application we put together. And we are just improving our standards, and our quality assurance just gets better, and that to make sure that we do the right thing with our data. And thank you very much for our speakers, Taariq Surtee, Nina Lewin, and Eleni Flack-Davison. Your input has been really amazing. I think a follow-up session will really be appreciated somewhere in the near future, maybe as soon as we have the final version of the Code of Conduct of POPIA, and as we've learned from our experiences and going through these processes. But thank you very much, and thank you to everyone who attended. Have a lovely afternoon.
Bye. You can find us at the library or online. So have a shot.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.